Hello, good afternoon, everyone. We welcome you to this one of its own kind of webinar, first time in packaging industry, where we'll be talking about how we can optimize the sourcing for corrugated boxes. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Sachin Agrawal. I'm one of the founder of Bizongo. Along with two of my friends, founded this company 3.5 years back, and what we do at Bizongo is we are a platform for everything packaging, and we are enabling enterprises to source and design packaging by technology first approach. A little bit background of myself: I'm an IIT Bombay chemical graduate, graduated in 2012, worked for 2.5 years, and then founded this company. Today we are going to in this event we're going to talk about a lot about packaging industry, the corrugated box industry, and how we can optimize the sourcing for the same. With me, I have Mr. Prakash Shetty. Introduction to his career before I started my schooling. He has been doing sourcing, strategic sourcing, digital procurement, logistic procurement for GSK for 14 years, and he joined us around a year back. And I'll let him introduce more.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this webinar. And thanks for the introduction, Sachin. A little bit more about myself. So I come with around 17 years of experience in various functions in the FMCG as well as the automotive industry. I have worked in Tata Motors and GSK different divisions before. In this particular role, so my role today is to head growth. Partner growth essentially has category management, sourcing, strategic seller management, partner engagements, as well as all the technical development under this umbrella. So me and my team of professionals from procurement as well as sourcing, supply chain, as well as technical background. We are behind, all the kind of the things that we'll talk about is you could get a sense of what partner growth function is about.
Yeah.
Warm welcome once again. Yeah, Sachin.
Yes, great. Thank you, Prakash. So just to set the context up and tell you guys a little bit more about what Bizongo is. We are a platform for everything packaging. We are India's #1 multi-category packaging platform as of today, and we have a completely technology-first approach towards building platforms and solution for this vast, massive ecosystem. But you can say, Bizongo is very similar to what an Oyo is for stay, what an Ola is for commute, or what an Alibaba is for global trade. So we are trying to do similar things what these companies have done, and we are coming across some exciting, interesting problem statements in our journey. We're very excited by being part of this ecosystem. Now, for today's session, we want to focus on one of the very important product category, which is corrugated box, which is part of the sourcing processes of almost every industry which produces or uses any type of material or product. And we will be going ahead we'll be talking about a lot of different ways in which we can optimize the sourcing of corrugated boxes. Before we delve into that, there are three key levers that I want to talk about, which we believe are the most important elements when it comes to sourcing of any packaging material out there. So when we look at sourcing effectively, sourcing with a technology first approach, there are three key value drivers that we believe are the most important to those organizations and those people. The one of them is about how cost effective my sourcing is. How can I constantly optimize my costs by bringing in more operational efficiency, cost efficiency, and various other ways that we are going to talk about. Also, packaging is an essential product So what everybody wants, that packaging has to be there 100% of the times when they need it. Hence, on time in full availability of packaging is essential for everyone who is using that. And at the same time, people want more and more visibility into the entire value chain that they have on outsourcing. And if anyone who is strategically sourcing packaging materials, if we can take care of these three elements, we believe the sourcing becomes extremely efficient, and it starts complementing the business growth that a company needs. So in today's session, we will talk about the key optimizing levers for procurement of corrugated boxes. So while we have been doing a lot of work in terms of understanding the fundamental aspects of sourcing of corrugated boxes, we realize that again there are three key levers which makes sourcing of corrugated boxes very optimized, both from a cost optimization perspective as well as operational efficiency point of view. So the first factor out of that is commercial optimization. How we can optimize the cost of material through various levers that Prakash is going to talk about in details in a while. So that's the first lever of optimization, how we can optimize the material cost. The second lever around optimization is value engineering, and actually we have found out that that's the most powerful lever because it allows you to optimize the material which goes into making of the boxes, and the design and the form and the shape. All of those things can come together in order to further optimize and value engineer the product so that it comes at a very effective price. The third lever, which we've seen as part of the entire supply chain, which affects your total cost of ownership. So how do we manage our manufacturers? How much time and resources we put in terms of managing the entire value chain? How well we have the packaging available for our needs? Is it available 100% of the times when we need it? All of those things go into the total cost of ownership, and that by optimizing the supply chain, by designing it right, by designing it for packaging being available 100% of the times, we can achieve significant amount of optimization in sourcing. So yeah, with this, I'll pass it on to Prakash, who will further go in details about these levers that I talked about. Meanwhile, we will encourage all of you. You guys can reach out to us in Zoom chat window, and if you have any answers, any questions, any queries, can post it there. My team is there. They will look into it, and we can take a few of those questions towards the end of the webinar. Also, at the same time, you guys are encouraged to participate in the polls that my team is running during the webinar, and there are a couple of polls that will be running, and stay tuned to participate and tell us your thoughts on those. So to Prakash now.
Yeah. So thanks, Sachin, for setting the context for the subject of the webinar. So we will start with the first one, which is improvement in the commercial savings. And we will get into, so we'll be talking about the overall breakup of how the cost is structured. So before we get into the first slide, we'd like to do a poll, a very quick poll. And if you can answer that poll through the windows that you'll have that question appearing in the window. The question is, what is the overall, according to you, how much is the overall contribution of raw material in the overall price?
So you have another 10 seconds left before the poll gets over. I think it is around 30%.
So, should we read out the
action?
Okay. Okay, so we have, looks like we have a lot of people answering it right. Okay, and here goes the chart. So this is a very broad cost breakup of a typical corrugated carton that is being bought in India. As you see in the slide, 70 to 75% of the cost is contributed from the raw material procurement. Okay, that's a big number, like 3/4 of the overall cost coming from there. Then followed by conversion, which is the next bucket of like 15 to 18%. And then there is a profit margin which the converter is adding around 5 to 8%. And then there is transport cost anywhere ranging between 3 to 8% depending on the carton SKU as well as the distance which is traveled, and then part load, full truckload, and those parameters. Now for each of these cost contributors, broadly what you see as elements on the right side of your the slide. Say for example, if it is a raw material cost, the kind of drivers where you can influence the particular material cost is like how do you source the raw material. So RM sourcing is like one of the parameters. Then there are other parameters like the scale of purchase. So one is the model of purchase. The second is the scale of purchase that you have. For conversion, there are things which determine how you can influence the conversion cost is the scale of operations, the level of automation, which is like a semi or a auto corrugated line, how well the capacities are utilized for a particular manufacturer, as well as how effectively they are able to deploy working capital and pass on those efficiencies back to you as a customer. Then profit is something which is external to the source of consumption, but that is always based on strategic understanding and dialogue. You can look at how a particular supplier can make a lower percentage profit, but in absolute terms, based on scale and volume of buying, they can then pass on those benefits to you. Lastly, transport. So transport is where you could, the drivers of transport are like how well you can aggregate the demand, as well as how you are located, say closer to the factories, say your plant being closer to the factories of corrugated box manufacturers. So in this particular section of improving cost savings, we will touch upon raw materials as well as conversion a little bit more in detail. And in the later slides, we'll look at the transport aggregation as well as the other parameters. Yeah. Okay. So this is about RM sourcing. So how you source in terms of say your model. So typically we see that the corrugated converters are sourcing from the mills which are located nearby. Our experience suggests that 200 to 300 kilometers of radius is where the supply comes from. There could be exceptional cases though. It could come from farther distances, and but proximity to the mill is required to optimize on the transportation cost. The second factor is also that typically we have seen in India, although mills can supply directly to the converters, but usually the transactions are routed through distributors because mills don't want that kind of a complexity, or unless and until the volume of buying is extremely huge, they wouldn't entertain converters to deal with them directly. So it is routed through the distributor. But in any which case, it is always good to for a customer to have like for a converter to have a direct engagement with the mill, so that they can get wherever possible they can leverage on that relationship and get benefits in terms of price as well as in terms of supplies. Okay. The second driver is the scale of purchase, and this is about how much the buying is being done by the converter. And now this is not about your specifications or your SKUs. It is about collectively how much a particular manufacturer is buying paper from what kind of mills, and therefore how much the converter is in a position to leverage that volume and then translating into the price savings. So we have taken a couple of initiatives in our portfolio where say in normal circumstances there could be advance or there could be credit, and the purchases are done by the converter based on the requirements or the kind of demand, the firm demand that they have from the clients. But we have also seen certain interventions where, depending on the visibility that the client provides, the converter can actually book the paper in advance. So they can put together like a 2-month requirement or 3-month requirement, book it together, take the delivery, and against the high volume that they have given to the mill, they can get savings in the range of 2 to 4% savings are also possible. But where working capital is to be funded, and you need to invest money behind it. But you can always do like net calculations and find out whether it is going to be beneficial for you or not. The next cost driver is about automation. So automation, a lot of you people in the audience would be aware broadly about semi-automatic and automatic. Over the last few years, a lot of clients have moved from semi-automatic to automatic because of the advantages that it offers in terms of quality, consistency. But let us also, so we would like to highlight that other than quality and consistency, it also plays a key role in the cost. There are certain criteria that for a particular SKU to be bought on automatic line, it should be actually exceeding 5-ton quantity for a particular run. Otherwise, it becomes difficult for you to generate economy from the automation. So having done that, so if you are able to cross that threshold and if you are able to generate good amount of volume, we can say that relative to semi-automatic plant, like 3 to 4% of savings on the conversion is very much possible. The next cost driver is about the capacity utilization. We have seen we have a lot of corrugated carton manufacturers on board, so we have more than 100 manufacturers who are working with us in different parts of the country. And what we have seen in general in the industry is that the capacity utilization ranges anywhere between say 50 to 60%, and then there could be exceptional cases where the capacity utilization is on the higher side, and people are investing in bigger factories or for expanding their capacities. But in general, broadly, it is in the range of 50 to 60%. Our study has suggested that if we are able to increase the capacity utilization by 10 percentage points, so if you are able to take it from say 50% to 60%, and if you can sit with the manufacturer and you can kind of agree on passing on say benefits, even say 50% of the benefits, if you are able to take back from the manufacturer, it can result into a net price saving of 2 to 3% to you. How does this happen is because if you are able to give them more volumes to create that extra capacity utilization by 10%, they can allocate their fixed costs better, and they can then pass on those savings to you. The next cost driver is also scale of operations. Now, scale of operations is beyond like the level of automation. So even if we consider that, say let us assume that you have gone for an automatic plant, but within automatic plant also there are people who operate at different scales, and then the people who operate at very, very high scales, so there is actually that the economy of scale which is factoring into the kind of machines, the quality of the machines, the equipment, which when you spread over the kind of volume that you are producing, you are able to give a better per unit cost after taking those higher volumes. So again, some numbers over here, if we compare a particular plant with 1500 tons per month, and then you compare it with a very, very high throughput plant of like say 5000 tons per month, you can, between these two, there could be a price differential of 2 to 4%. Some of this price differential can also come in from raw material efficiencies, but not just raw material scale, but also conversion cost is something they should be able to create benefits and pass on to you. The last of the cost drivers in terms of commercial savings is the working capital. In our experience, we have seen that many of the manufacturers are actually funding their working capital through banks and financial institutions, and this is typically done through ODs or CCs. And they also, because they are growing at a very, very stable rate, typically you see that against a GDP growth of 6 to 7%, the corrugated carton manufacturers are growing maybe say 8 to 10%, 12%, 15%. So these are the kind of business growth that they have. Again, this kind of a business growth, they are able to manage a working capital funding even with say covering their limits to the tune of say 70 to 80%. Okay. But wherever they are like say rapidly they could grow, and these are the opportunities that we have seen where we strike strategic relationships with our manufacturers, and then there is an opportunity for them to grow by say 30%, 40%, and so on. In such cases, we have seen that early payments, if you are able to offer them early payments, and they can invest that into their working capital and generate returns through their business of selling cartons, those returns are going to be much higher than the cost of capital which is there. And even this can translate into savings being passed on to us and accordingly. So similarly, a client also can realize these savings through effective discounting.
So Prakash, one thing on this, I mean, this looks like a lot of levers that a sourcing manager can use in order to optimize cost purely through commercial savings. But if someone has to prioritize one out of a few out of these, how should one go about that?
So Sachin, this is so it is a range of different kind of opportunity areas that somebody can work on. Now, where to prioritize is a function of what kind of product they are making, what is their scale of operation, what is their cost of capital. For example, if there is a particular, if you know that as a customer you come to know that your converter is requiring working capital, and if we are able to fund that working capital and they can make best use of that in terms of generating higher returns through business. We have seen that with corrugated carton manufacturers, the return on capital employed is anywhere between like say 10 to 20% or even a little bit upwards of that in some cases.
Yeah.
So if they are able to generate incremental returns by borrowing on working capital, then that is the kind of lever to deploy. And if we see that there are the kind of raw material buying that they are doing and they are reaching a particular threshold, and if you can take them over that threshold to a particular level, which attracts some kind of a discounting through the raw material sources, is something that you can look at as a lever.
Nice.
In fact, there are additional opportunities which is not there in the slide. But if you can aggregate demand across different suppliers that you have, so if you have 10 different suppliers in the same geography and they have their individual paper requirements, and if you have some way of putting that together and then you talking to the mill or to the bigger distributors, then there is a possibility that it can generate kind of some savings for all those 10 manufacturers who are working with you.
Interesting. Now we have, I think we have time for our second poll. So the question for the poll is that can we achieve cost optimization in corrugated box sourcing through value engineering? Yes or no? And you have got another 10 seconds to participate in the poll.
Yeah. So the question is how well you are cognizant with value engineering and standardization kind of opportunities. Okay. So more than 80% are well conversant. So which means we can go into the topic and we don't need to explain what value engineering is. We can actually talk about projects and examples. So value engineering. So as all of you understand, it is anything which can influence the specifications, the way the material is used. So this is it is more internal to the customer, to the client, on how we can challenge ourselves and generate returns which are significant as well as which are sustainable. Because at times, sometimes what happens is that if you have been using your suppliers for long and you would have negotiated with them a lot, you would have scrapped the barrel, and then there are certain limits that you would reach. But value engineering is something more of internally reflecting on what are the kind of standards that you are using. Is it possible you can challenge them versus the benchmarks or any kind of proactive working at your end, and therefore create more value which is like sustainable and which remains with you over a long period of time. So within value engineering and standardization, so we have broadly what you see in the slide, broadly 4 types of projects or initiatives, I could say. The first type is optimization of specifications. So this is like a big bucket, and we have seen in our experience wherever this has been possible to be done, we have delivered savings anywhere between 8 to 15%. A few examples we could take is for one of our clients who is like a global industrial tool manufacturer. We have brought down the specifications of cartons they are using on some SKUs from 7-ply to 5-ply. Okay, I believe a lot of people come from the audience. A lot of people come from the industry, so you understand what is a ply structure. So this we did based on jointly working with the client, understanding what is their real requirement, on what do they really require in terms of the carton, the kind of protection it gives to your product, as well as the transit worthiness. And fundamentally redesigning it, saying that, okay, is 7-ply really required? How the savings come through is that when you go in from a 7-ply to a 5-ply, reduce the number of layers, it means like straight away that much amount of material is required less. And you have seen that, okay, almost like 3/4 of your cost is coming from raw material. And therefore, this is a big area, and that's why you see like a big opportunity of 8 to 15% wherever it is. You can work internally within your systems and challenge that. Similarly, there's another example which we did for a leading retail conglomerate in India, and where we moved certain SKUs from 5-ply to a 3-ply. The second bucket within standardization is like harmonization of specifications. So in harmonization, so what we do is, so we, for this particular client who is in the automobile accessories industry, we identified 180 SKUs, which are the product SKUs on what they sell the spare parts and accessories. And for those 180 SKUs, we proposed to them that they can actually use 17 unique specifications for the corrugated cartons in place of, say, 44 different SKUs. And when you do this kind of a simplification, how it translates into savings is that you are able to generate more volume for a particular SKU. Again, you can, going back to the earlier slides where we said that between a semi-automatic and an automatic, or when the operation is at a higher scale, you should be able to generate those returns or savings. So per SKU volume goes up, and therefore you should be able to get some savings, as well as the machine runnability or the utilization of the machine also improves, and there could be some savings through conversion, which your converter should be able to pass on to you. So here we have seen in this particular case, like 4 to 5% of savings we have been able to provide to the particular client in the automobile accessories. The next initiative on standardization is the specification standardization. So what we mean by specification standardization is the kind of ply combinations being used. We did this with the same tool manufacturer, the industrial tool manufacturers, and we saw, so we mapped all the SKUs that they are buying for corrugated cartons, which are like 400 SKUs put together. And we mapped that for all those 400 SKUs, there were like 34 unique combinations of plies. So what a ply combination means that, okay, the ply structure, whether it is a 5-ply, 3-ply, as well as what is the GSM of each layer, as well as what is the BF of each layer. So there were 34 unique such combinations, and from that 34, we brought it down to 90, which yielded like a 2 to 3% saving. And how that saving came from is because you simplify the ply structure, it means that there are lower units of paper SKUs being bought by the converter from the mill manufacturers, and therefore the volume of raw material purchase per unit can go up, and therefore some kind of a discounting or economies of scale happening between the converter and the paper mills. So this also is something which we did for the same manufacturer, and a lot of joint work is required to be able to drive this. The last one, as an example in standardization, is about decal width standardization. So here we did this. This example is for an Indian it also becomes easy and faster to be able to change the machine. The way the machine setup is done faster, and the changeover also can be expedited. So when we run through these examples, the savings look very, very attractive, and that's the reason Sachin was saying that this is a lever to be really used. But one thing we should all remember is that value engineering is not simple. It is not easy. First and foremost, it requires you to be able to question your own ways of working as well as your standards. You should be able to ask those very, very tough questions, saying that, okay, if a particular structure is being used for the last 10 years in my product, does that by itself mean that it is the right one? So these are the kind of tough questions which you should be asking as consumer organization, and if you are able to do that, then always your suppliers can support you in terms of providing the samples and working together along with you. So in our team, we can say that, okay, we have a team which comprises of people coming from packaging development as well as sourcing. And we also help the clients to actually ask these kinds of questions to be able to reflect on them, so that we can help them generate those savings, and then it is like a sustainable saving for long.
Yeah, definitely. I believe you can extract great results only by questioning the status quo, and I think value engineering starts from there, as Prakash mentioned, and I think these are like really big savings. If I can save somewhere in between 8 to 20% for my organization by just doing right value engineering, I think that's a fantastic lever to have. And often lately, I have been I keep wondering whenever I receive any products. Most of the time, the products are of the boxes are of much higher size than what they ideally should have been. Sometimes they are so sturdy, but the product within those boxes doesn't require that much highly spec box. Yeah, very, very, very interesting lever, and I believe still there's a long way to go for enterprises in order to optimize their type, structure, specifications of boxes.
Right. Okay, so this is the last amongst the broad strategic initiatives which one could take. What you see on this slide is we have plotted what are the kind of trucks that we hire for a typical 20 feet load, and for a full truck load of a corrugated carton, what is the amount of money that we spend in moving that across different kinds of distances. So for example, if it is traveling 1,000 kilometers, then what it means is that the corrugated carton, as a percentage of the overall cost, we might end up spending, say, anywhere between 10 to 15% of the overall cost on transporting itself. Now, this is just like these numbers are just to indicate that there's a lot of emphasis on local sourcing which happens for any corrugated carton consumer, and therefore there is a tendency that people would want to keep the carton manufacturers close to the point of consumption and your factories. So what you see on the left bottom is like a small window where people typically operate at distances of within 300 kilometers, so that they can maintain their cost in the range of 5 to 7% and not exceed that particular cost. Yeah. Okay. So in this last bucket, we will talk about what we have not covered in the first and the second one. So just a refresh. The first bucket talks about what is the savings that you can drive commercially, negotiating or jointly working with your supplier. The second bucket talked about what you can do internally within your own, your own ways of working or your specifications and standard, and what you can technically influence in the product that you're buying. Now, this third bucket covers everything else. It is about supply chain, it is about logistics, it is about rationalization that you can do in how you buy, which can also drive in certain savings either in the price, or if not in price, also in like the total cost of ownership. So the first one is local sourcing. Now, local sourcing is not about like how you can influence your cost drivers, but it is about, we would like to mention that taking reference from the earlier chart that we showed, there is a tendency for clients to buy locally because the transportation cost is significant part, and as long as it is managed within like a 200-300 kilometers radius, you know that you are in control of the overall cost, because transport makes there is a tendency that the transport cost is high, and therefore makes it 5 to 7%, and it can become more when you travel longer distances. So this typically is a constraint for a lot of clients that we see. Incidentally, when we look at it from our perspective at Bizongo, because we are working with corrugated carton manufacturer where a lot of spend is getting aggregated, we also see that at times we are able to overcome this particular barrier. We end up transporting over longer distances. So we could even transport from, say, 500 kilometers, but because we are able to extract that economy of scale as well as aggregation with our seller, we would still be able to be competitive. So it can happen with you wherever you have your scale. So you have a particular scale at a particular location. It is still possible that you can transport over longer distances and still you can get a good price from your suppliers. The second cost driver over here is about the sources of supply and how it translates into complexity. The first point is about local sourcing. So local sourcing also leads into development of suppliers which are closer to your point of consumption. Plus, we've also seen that a lot of clients would want to mitigate their sourcing risk, and therefore they end up developing alternate sources for every kind of an SKU that they are buying, because they wouldn't want to risk anything and therefore bank on one particular supplier to give them all their SKUs. So they would try to split their spend for a particular location into more number of suppliers, as well as they also at times they need to genuinely split the business, because certain SKUs, if they are low volume, are being produced on a semi-automatic plant, something is being produced at an automatic plant, certain fluid combination. So it requires the business at a particular location to be split into more number of people. Now, what this does, so while it is minimizing the risk because you end up talking to more people, but it also has certain other costs which come, and that is a cost of complexity. It is still falls within your overall total cost of ownership TCO. What it means is that the more number of suppliers that you deal with, it becomes necessary for you to raise those many purchase orders, to talk to those many people, and to follow up with them, to talk to them about schedule, to ask them, okay, is the raw material there? Is the supplies ready? Is the truck leaving? So a lot of interaction and coordination is happening with multiple people for you, and which means complexity. So this also is something that you need to consider while designing your overall cost, and not just look at from a purchase price perspective. Now, how you can influence these cost drivers we would say, is demand aggregation. So demand aggregation means, so there are a couple of things over here which we'd like to talk about. One is about supplier rationalization. So if you are dealing with, say, 10 different suppliers for a particular location in corrugated carton, can you look at opportunities where you can rationalize and bring from, say, 10, you work with, say, 2 or 3? Now, that's a balance that you need to strike, the balance of converging and driving economies of scale as well as better relationships. At the same time, you have to also balance out with the kind of risk that you are taking by putting all eggs in one basket. But definitely it will give you, if you are able to strike the right balance, it should able to give you certain savings, which will form the overall part of your savings bucket. The second kind of aggregation is through transportation. So transportation is where we see that corrugated cartons is, for many clients, it is transported through part truckloads, because it is being bought frequently, and because it is being bought whenever you require it to be bought, and because you are not keeping much of inventory, there are a lot of movements which can happen on part truck loads. And part truck loads, you understand, is less efficient in terms of pricing. So if you are able to aggregate the transportation in some way, for example, either through a milk road or through aggregating demand together and then transporting it across different suppliers, and then it gets transported to your factory, it is also you are going to get that savings, because transport is still, like, even at 5 to 7% is still like a key cost driver for you. The third thing is warehousing, so cases where not through milk route, but if you want to aggregate the demand and you would want to store it at a third-party warehouse, and then you need to you could bring it to your consuming location. One might argue that warehousing is going to add cost, and you need like an additional point where the transport is coming in and the transport is going out. But there are instances where if the complexity is really high, we can establish that despite doing like an incoming transport as well as an outgoing transport, the total cost of ownership can be influenced, and we can bring it down by, say, 1 to 2%. So these savings are less in terms of the cost of ownership, but it gives you a lot of intangible benefits in terms of control on your supplies, avoiding stockouts, avoiding sales losses, and so on. The last point on this particular area of say total cost of ownership is, we would like to make a mention that say Sachin talked about in his initial slides that one of our value proposition is also OTIF. And when we are talking to our clients in different kinds of industries, and we also talk to a lot of supply chain experts, a lot of supply chain consultants. One of the things that we are given to understand now is that the industry is slowly migrating from an OTIF kind of an expectation to an expectation where you as a client, you might say that, okay, listen, I don't care what is your OTIF, and I don't want to bear the burden of a particular lead time. So I don't want to give you 15 days to be able to supply. What I need as a customer is that the stock should be available whenever the production is going to be taken. We come to know like just a day or 2 days in advance, and those amount of corrugated cartons need to be there so that the production can happen smoothly. Now, this is a kind of transition that we are seeing where we are the kind of expectation is coming to say whenever it is required, the corrugated carton should be available. And this, we believe, can only happen through an auto replenishment model, which also we are working on for the future. And if the clients can give visibility about their inventory as well as their consumption pattern through very, very solid data, it is easy for any aggregator platform to be able to consolidate that and provide the stocks whenever it is required on an auto replenishment model. What it also means that it means that there is a lot of inventory savings which is possible at your end. You don't need to keep space aside for a material like corrugated carton, which is extremely bulky. It occupies a lot of space. Plus, your working capital is also locked in terms of the cost of inventory sitting in your own warehouses. So this, why we are clubbing it under demand aggregation is this is something which you could also drive it directly with your corrugated carton manufacturers. But practically in India, this is difficult because when you're working with a lot of corrugated carton manufacturers, getting visibility or getting very, very strong data in terms of what is the inventory at their end and whether they can supply on as is, where is, as required basis is something difficult, and that's where when you are able to aggregate the demand, you should be able to drive that effectively.
So Prakash, what I understand from this that as a client, if I am monitoring my inventory data of boxes as well as my consumption data, if I'm monitoring those two data points very well, I can actually shift from ordering to auto replenishing my packaging.
Absolutely. So it is like say, yeah. So that's a good point, Sachin, where we are saying that ordering as an activity also is something which requires effort.
And
so when ordering is done,
too.
So and it could also be erroneous that we say so much. I worked in the industry. I worked also in sales, incidentally, and we see that forecast accuracy is something is there's always a scope, and there's a very, very large scope for improving forecast accuracy across different kinds of industries, whether it is FMCG or whether it is e-commerce. Forecast accuracy is always like a challenge area, and no matter how much you as a procurement organization you try to control and you try to mitigate it through inventories, there are still stockouts happen on one end of the extreme. There are stockouts which are happening and sales losses. On the other end of the extreme, there are also where you have too much of inventory you have kept. Your warehouse is choked, and you are even bearing the cost of that capital which is locked. Okay, so we have covered as per the subject of the webinar. We have covered these broad these three topics on how we can create strategies for cost optimization or procurement optimization under corrugated cartons. Now, these are various buckets. What you see in the slide right now are different buckets in which we were very, very happy to receive a lot of questions. So there are more than 100 questions which we have received in the last couple of weeks since we have opened up the webinar links, and we can bucket them into different categories. Due to time constraints, we will not be able to go through each and every questions. And I can say that the way we have designed the presentation, the slides, a lot of questions we have considered, and we have built those questions in how we explain to you on those three strategy buckets. But still, there are certain questions that we would like to take, which are additional questions. So these are a few questions that we would like to take, and we would like to answer those. Very broadly, we have bucketed into four categories. But again, we are also assuring that in case there are certain questions that you would have asked whenever you have written to our team, and in case we have not been answering those questions either through this presentation or this particular slide in the last few minutes, we will try to get back to you with a written reply for all those questions. So we'll individually contact you back, and wherever it is possible, we will answer those questions in person to you. So taking the first bucket is around costing. So there are some additional questions we have received. I'll just read out those questions for the benefit of everyone. So the first question within costing bucket is how can we do the cost breakup for corrugated boxes to make sure we have the right price. So we captured this very broadly in the cost model, but again there are detailed versions that we work on internally. What you saw on the slide is a very broad framework of where the major cost drivers are sitting, but we have very detailed workings where you could put so the way we do our costing is we look into the specification, the volume for every layer or every ply. What is the GSM? What is the burst factor? What is the rate of the paper for that particular volume? How much conversion cost in terms of rupees per kg, or considering very basic unit dynamics of the kind of capital use, the kind of equipment. And we convert that into conversion. We look at the details of how the printing is done. And then lastly, the transportation as well as profit margin. So very soon, we are going to open this up to the larger community. So very soon, you are going to have a price calculator on our portal. We will inform you through email, and we are also going to inform a lot of our other clients, the current clients that we have. This will be like a very broad price calculator where you can put in your specifications, your volumes, and you should get in a broad price range within which you should be able to buy that. Okay. Now this will again be an indicative cost model, because all said and done, a particular price that we finalize with our supplier is specific to the SKU. It's very specific to the kind of relationship that we have nurtured and built over a period of time with the supplier. And same would be the case with you also as a client. Your modeling will always be a function of whom you are dealing with. But this is something which is very interesting that we're working with our product team, our technology team. And in the next few weeks, we are going to be out with this, and we'll share that with you. The second question is on conversion charges. What would be on a per kg basis, and how much saving we can realize, and in how much time? So per kg is not used usually wherever there are changes in the kind of SKUs, or if you are frequently changing the specification, one would agree like a per kg conversion, but otherwise we don't encourage per kg. It is better to use like a per unit kind of a rate when you talk to your manufacturers. Then there are other questions on RM price fluctuations as well as outlook for corrugated paper. Yes, paper is a big driver of cost, and you can see how the international prices are moving, how your distributor prices is moving. But our recommendation to you would be look at what you can influence and what you can control rather than having. So there's a lot of data and analytics that we carry, but your focus should be that, okay, what you can influence with your distributors, with your mill manufacturers, with the kind of initiatives that we spoke about in the earlier slides. The other broad bucket is on vendor capability and selection. a lot of questions people have asked on how should we select our suppliers and how do we make sure that the suppliers that we have onboarded are giving us the right price as well as the quality, capability, everything. So we have a framework which we use, and every company will have different kinds of frameworks. So there are broadly 6 buckets in which we assess our manufacturers, our manufacturing partners, whether it is corrugated box or other categories. So the first one is about their manufacturing capability. The second is financial capability. The third is like quality management systems, which is about test methods, specifications, the hygiene, the factory GMP, GDP, and so on. The other parameters are about how do we determine their price competitiveness, and the last one is how well is the alignment between them and us, that we know that they are ready to work with in the long run, and therefore things like, say, transparency, open book costing, and so on. So these are the things which come in. So when you take different kinds of parameters and when you are doing a comprehensive assessment of your supply base, then you can be assured that it is not just about price, it is not just about quality, because you need that your suppliers work with you in the long run. They supply to you the right kind of technical parameters, as well as they also keep delivering cost savings to you. The third bucket is supply and service. So we touched upon this. We'll not get into more of detail, but the conversation we had, like Sachin and me, is on auto replenishment. Is because these are the challenges, the kind of challenges that you have been highlighting is those challenges will keep appearing. We may try to improve the forecast accuracy. We may try to keep inventory, but these challenges keep coming and hitting us. So we believe auto replenishment is looks like the supply chain model of the future for handling complexity, at the same time assuring that the overall cost is minimized and we can reduce the TCO. The last one is some questions were asked on plant capability and technology. So automatic versus semi-automatic, we broadly touched upon when we were talking. There was other questions that people are interested on what kind of technological advancements are happening in manufacturing as well as design. So we could say that we are seeing that particularly the plants which are running at very, very high throughputs, they are investing in machineries and equipment coming from, say, places like Germany. So Germany ranks the top in terms of the kind of quality of equipment which is used to very, very high throughput as well as consistent quality. Plus, it can give you economies of scale and the price benefit. So there are certain machineries and equipment which are being these advancements which are happening, and we are seeing that people are buying more of these machines. The other thing which is a change which is slowly taking shape with a few of the clients is how fundamentally certain parameters are used for design. Now this is a bit technical where so what the final thing which is required for a carton to be fit for use is the compression strength. And what we have seen is that some clients have already migrating into that. So RCT is a better indicator, a better lead indicator of a compression strength as compared to a traditional burst factor or the other kind of parameters. But still, the industry is taking time to be able to migrate. It also depends on how the paper is supplied. So there are certain mills who have advanced themselves and they have gone into an RCT kind of a phenomenon. And we are also working with certain clients to see is there possible that we can migrate from a BF to an RCT kind of a phenomenon. And once we do that, then in future you can always work on value engineering it, because you have a better control over the end use application on how much is the strength really required when the cartons are stacked together and they have to be stored in a warehouse, or they have to go through transport over long distances till they reach their points of consumption. So these are the few things which are happening as new technology advancements or improvements on a continuous basis.
Yeah.
So
I guess as promised at the start, a lot of participants have asked the questions during the session. So we'll pick a few of them which we might have not covered during the presentation and the questions that Prakash went through. So one of the question which has come, which seems to be very interesting, that how sustainable you think are corrugated cartons. And I believe this is, sustainability has been one of the talking point in the entire packaging industry. And, how do we deal with that, and how do we enable enterprises with solutions around that? It's going to be very, very critical for the entire community as such. But yeah, when it comes to corrugated boxes, because it's a paper-based material, it is fairly sustainable in nature. The good part is that because of in the global ecosystem currently, a large part of more than 99% of paper is recycled. India only uses recycled craft paper. So from that perspective, we would call corrugated box a very sustainable material, and we are constantly seeing a lot of enterprise clients moving towards alternative of plastic products in form of corrugated boxes. So for an example, a plastic PP box being replaced by a corrugated wood box with a almost equivalent shelf life, but complete sustainably recyclable product. We believe that because of this entire drive around sustainability, we will see a lot of alternative options being emerged for corrugated boxes as a category, and this being a pure sustainable category is always good to be part of the packaging ecosystem through this. So we can take one last question, probably something that we not have touched upon that well. We can.
So one of the questions we can take is why do you think we should not purchase from large manufacturers? So we are not. I'm not sure how this question has come up. But if I have to rightly understand the question is, if your scale of buying is on the lower side, then in that case, buying from a very large manufacturer may not make sense because you're depending on the volume of what you purchase, you may not be able to economically produce at that manufacturer. And similarly, on the other end, the level of interest, the kind of inclination that they show may be on the lower side, and it might just come in the way of a very, very solid relationship happening. So even if they quote, maybe subsequently you might encounter issues in service as well as in price.
Yeah, so I think we can conclude the Q&A session here. I think other questions seem similar to what we have tried to capture in the presentation and the subsequent questions. But we will be definitely sending out an email to all of you participants around the video of the webinar, and please feel free to reply to that email in case you have any questions, and in case you want a copy of the presentation that Prakash and team has beautifully prepared. We'll be glad to share the copy as well as a reply to your email on that. So yeah, I believe if I summarize and conclude what we discussed during the webinar. Corrugated boxes as a category is a large category in India. It is approximately 30,000 crore what corrugated boxes being bought by enterprises. There are more than 10,000 manufacturers in this industry, so it affects a very large ecosystem. And it has at the same time it has got multiple parameters, multiple levers which can help an enterprise optimize the sourcing of boxes, and those being commercial savings, value engineering, as well as supply chain optimization. We believe, as we look into the future, data and technology are going to play a key part in terms of delivering the right cost optimization, because there are too many data points that one needs to look at. There's a tremendous amount of prioritization, and the future is moving towards auto replenishment of boxes. That's the right supply chain design, where you completely move away from planning and ordering on a frequent basis, but rely on your data of inventory, your data of consumption to auto replenish your corrugated boxes. So on that front, we would like to conclude the session. We really thank you. I mean, in the first place, you are completely surprised by the kind of participation that we saw from the registration, as well as all the people that joined. This really encourages us to do more of these sessions. This is this is a first of its type of initiative that someone has taken in the packaging industry, and this we will love to play our part in terms of further playing a role in getting more of these sessions out there. Yeah.
So thanks a lot for joining in and spending your valuable time. And we thoroughly enjoyed talking to you and sharing these insights.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you and bye.
Bye.
Thank you.